Grinder.
Grinder.
Grinding.
Grinding.
A country devastated by civil war and grinding poverty.
Grindstone.
Grindstone.
Gringo.
Gringo.
Griot. Griot.
Grip.
Grip.
Hold the microphone in a firm grip and keep it still.
She felt her wrist caught in a vice-like grip.
Don't loosen your grip on the rope or you'll fall.
He released his grip and stepped back.
Stalin's determination to keep an iron grip on Eastern Europe.
By 1979, South Africa was tightening its grip on Namibia.
The recession could be avoided if business keeps a firm grip on its costs.
I'm just trying to get a grip on what's happening.
She was losing her grip on reality.
I've never really got to grips with this new technology.
I don't know what's the matter. I think I'm losing my grip.
Stop being hysterical and get a grip on yourself.
For God's sake, get a grip. A country in the grip of famine. My racket needs a new grip.
Boots which give a good grip.
I gripped the rail and tried not to look down.
The woman moved closer to Beth, gripping her arm tightly.
A country gripped by economic problems.
Panic suddenly gripped me when it was my turn to speak.
A story that really grips you.
Radial tyres grip the road well.
Gripe.
Gripe.
Joe came in griping about how cold it was.
My main gripe was the price of refreshments. Gripe water.
Gripe water.
Griping.
Griping.
Gripping.
Gripping.
Colin's gripping detective novel.
Grizzly.
Grizzly.
A series of grisly murders.
Grist.
Grist.
Any publicity is good. It's all grist to the mill.
Gristle.
Gristle.
Grit.
Grit.
Make sure both surfaces are free from dust and grit. The council is responsible for putting grit on icy roads. Just grit your teeth and hang on. It'll be over soon. Ben gritted his teeth, hoping Sasha wouldn't notice his fear. No, that's all right, she said through gritted teeth.
Gritter.
Gritter.
Gritty.
Gritty.
Hennin gave a typically gritty performance coming back from 4-0 down.
Her gritty determination.
Billingham's pictures have a gritty realism which can be almost upsetting.
Gritty soil had got under her nails.
Grizzle.
Grizzle.
Ben was grizzling about being tired.
Grizzled.
Grizzled.
A grizzled old man.
Grizzly bear.
Grizzly bear.
Groan.
Groan.
The kids all groaned when I switched off the TV.
As she kissed him, Gary groaned with pleasure.
Richard's jokes make you groan rather than laugh.
I'm tired of him moaning and groaning all the time.
It's too hot, he groaned.
The old tree groaned in the wind.
Casey let out a groan of protest.
The door opened with a groan.
Groat.
Groat.
Grocer.
Grocer.
Grocery.
Grocery.
Grog.
Grog.
Groggy.
Groggy.
I felt really groggy after 15 hours on the plane. Groin.
Groin.
Grommet.
Grommet.
Groom.
Groom. Groom.
Tim was being groomed for a managerial position. Claire's been groomed to take her father's place when he retires.
Her hair is always perfectly groomed.
Grooming. Grooming.
Groomsman.
Groomsman.
Groove.
Groove.
The bolt slid easily into the groove.
A shallow groove cut into the cliff.
Our product range was stuck in a groove.
A hypnotic dub groove.
Grooved.
Grooved.
A slightly grooved surface.
Groovy.
Groovy.
Grope.
Grope.
Guinea groped for her glasses on the bedside table.
We groped around in the darkness.
I was groping my way blindly through the trees.
Ali groped steadily towards the door.
She hesitated, seeming to grope for words.
Gross.
Gross.
A gross profit of $5 million.
A family with gross earnings of just £75 per week.
Soldiers accused of gross violations of human rights.
The company described reports of environmental disaster as gross exaggeration.
Ooh, gross. I hate spinach. Ooh, gross. I hate spinach.
Lambert was grossly overweight.
Medical records were found to be grossly inadequate.
A junior executive earning $50,000 gross.
The movie has already grossed over $10 million.
His dirty fingernails really gross me out.
Too gross of candles.
Gross domestic product.
Gross domestic product.
Gross margin.
Gross margin.
Gross national product. Gross national product.
Gross out.
Gross out. Gross out comedies.
Gross profit.
Gross profit.
Grotesque.
Grotesque.
It's grotesque to portray peace campaigners as unpatriotic. By modern standards, the treatment of prisoners was grotesque.
A grotesque figure with a huge head.
Grotto.
Grotto.
Grotesque.
Grotty.
Grotty.
A grotty little bar.
The next day I felt a bit grotty.
Grouch.
Grouch.
An old grouch.
He's always grouching about something. Grouchy.
Grouchy.
Ground.
Ground.
The leaves were slowly fluttering to the ground.
He lay on the ground and stared up at the sky.
The ground was frozen solid.
At night, badgers feed above ground.
These youngsters work 70 metres below ground level.
A raised platform stood 2 metres off the ground.
The air raids were followed by military action on the ground.
Ground troops. Dig the ground over in the autumn. Plant the seeds 2 centimetres deep in the ground.
The ground was dry, far too dry for growing corn. The ground was dry, far too dry for growing corn.
The landscape is a mixture of open ground and woodland. They were standing on the waste ground behind the car park.
Fishing grounds. These fields served as a hunting ground for the local people. The rivers are used as dumping grounds for industrial waste. He is buried in sacred ground. We decided to take a stroll in the hotel grounds.
Mental cruelty can be grounds for divorce. There are strong grounds for believing his statement. There are strong grounds for believing his statement.
Did the police have reasonable grounds to arrest him?
The proposal was rejected on environmental grounds.
Flying was ruled out on grounds of cost.
You're under arrest. On what grounds?
We oppose the bill on the grounds that it discriminates against women.
At meetings, we just keep going over the same ground.
His latest movie looks set to break new ground.
In his latest book, McManus returns to more familiar ground.
Often parents and teenagers find they have little common ground. Both parties are battling to occupy the centre ground.
Careful, Laura. You could be treading on dangerous ground.
Each side was unwilling to give ground.
A new football ground. It's their first defeat at their home ground all season.
The men threatened him, but he stood his ground and they fled.
Jason vowed to stand his ground, even if it meant losing his job.
Her show never really got off the ground in the UK.
It was feared that the extreme right would gain ground in the election.
His theories gradually gained ground among academics.
The Indian team seemed determined to regain the ground they lost in the last game.
The region, with its widespread poverty, provided fertile ground for revolutionary activists.
My task was to prepare the ground for the recruitment of support workers. The city of Tortona was burnt to the ground.
Kay's working herself into the ground trying to meet her deadlines. While the politicians talk of peace, the situation on the ground remains tense.
I guess he'll try to reach his old stomping ground to drum up support.
Coffee grounds.
The man has gone to ground since his photograph was published in a national newspaper.
All planes are grounded until the fog clears.
Both boats grounded on a mudbank.
Lewis' ideas were grounded in his Christian faith.
I got home at 2 a.m. and Dad grounded me on the spot.
Most 7-year-olds are grounded in the basics of reading and writing. Most 7-year-olds are grounded in the basics of reading and writing.
Ground bait.
Ground bait.
Ground beef.
Ground beef.
Groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking research.
Ground cloth.
Ground cloth.
Ground control.
Ground control.
Ground crew. Ground crew. Grounded.
Grounded.
Simmons says that her family keeps her grounded.
Grounder.
Grounder.
Ground floor.
Ground floor.
A ground floor flat. The dining room is on the ground floor.
Ground forces.
Ground forces.
Ground glass.
Ground glass.
Groundhog.
Groundhog.
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day.
Grounding.
Grounding.
A basic grounding in math is essential for the economics course.
Applicants must have a good grounding in human resources management.
The aim of the course is to give students a thorough grounding in English pronunciation.
A sense of grounding.
Groundless.
Groundless.
Fortunately, my suspicions proved groundless.
Mr. K's lawyer said the accusations were groundless.
Ground level.
Ground level.
Flats are set around a courtyard with shops at ground level.
Ground nut.
Ground nut.
Ground plan. Ground plan.
Documents which formed the ground plan for the welfare state.
Ground rent.
Ground rent.
Ground rules.
Ground rules.
Our book lays down the ground rules for building a patio successfully.
Ground sheet.
Ground sheet.
Groundsman.
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 Ground squirrel.
Ground squirrel.
Ground staff.
Ground staff.
Groundstroke. Groundstroke.
Groundswell.
Groundswell.
There is a groundswell of opinion that tougher laws are needed.
A groundswell of support for the Prime Minister.
Groundwater. Groundwater.
There are fears that groundwater might become contaminated.
Groundwork.
Groundwork.
His speech laid the groundwork for independence.
Much of the groundwork has already been done.
Ground zero.
Ground zero.
Buildings within 25 kilometers of ground zero would be flattened.
Group.
Group.
A group of children. A small group of islands. Get into groups of 4. He was surrounded by a group of admirers. Dolphins travel in small groups.
A group of us are going to London.
A left-wing terrorist group.
She is one of a group of women who have suffered severe side effects from the drug.
Minority groups are encouraged to apply.
A giant textiles group.
He owns a group of hotels in southern England.
The photo shows 4 men grouped round a jeep.
Different flowers can be grouped together to make a colourful display.
Small producers who group together to sell their produce.
We were grouped into 6 age bands.
We grouped the questions under 3 headings.
Group captain. Group captain. Group captain.
Group dynamics.
Group dynamics.
Groupie.
Groupie.
Grouping.
Grouping.
A grouping of 8 opposition parties.
During this period, the family unit becomes the natural social grouping.
A loose grouping of anti-capitalist protesters.
The grouping of students by ability.
Group practice.
Group practice.
Group therapy.
Group therapy.
Grouse.
Grouse.
The grouse shooting season. Roast grouse. His main grouse is that he isn't paid enough.
I haven't really got much to grouse about.
Grout.
Grout.
Grove.
Grove.
A small grove of beech trees.
He owns an orange grove near Tel Aviv.
Listen grove.
Grovel.
Grovel.
I had to really grovel to the bank manager to get a loan. I saw him grovelling in the road for his hat. A grovelling apology.
Grow.
Grow.
Support for Mr. Thompson is growing.
Sales of new cars grew by 10% last year.
The number of students at the college has grown from 200 to over 500. A growing number of people are taking part-time jobs.
The economy has grown steadily.
Fears are growing for the crew's safety.
A city that is still growing in size.
Skiing has really grown in popularity.
There is growing concern about climate change.
My growing interest in China.
We want to grow the export side of the business.
You've really grown since I last saw you.
Victor seemed to grow taller every day.
Stan grew 2 inches in 6 months.
A tree which will grow well in most types of soil.
The plants grow wild by the river.
Many families own plots of land to grow food.
Britain grows 6 million tons of potatoes a year.
The growing season is from April to September.
I've decided to grow my hair long.
The sound was growing louder.
Her tastes have changed as she's grown older.
Donna has grown tired of being a model.
Gradually, Fiona's eyes grew used to the darkness. After a while, the kids grew to like Mr. Cox.
The city he had grown to love.
She's grown tremendously as a musician.
The couple had been growing apart for years.
Sue grew into a lovely young woman.
The 2-part show has grown into a full-fledged series.
She will grow into her new role over the next few months.
I hated his music at first, but it grows on you.
I'm growing my fringe out.
Mike finally seemed to be growing out of his rebelliousness.
His art grew out of his love of nature.
Legislation which grew out of concern over the increasing crime rate.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago.
Trading settlements grew up by the river.
Grow bag.
Grow bag.
Grower.
Grower.
Apple growers.
Bamboo is a very vigorous grower.
Growing pains.
Growing pains.
The growing pains of a new republic. Growl.
Growl.
The dog growled at me.
Get out of my way, he growled. Who are you? He growled at me.
He heard a low growl behind him.
Groan.
Grown.
Whoever heard of a grown man being scared of the dark?
I've got 2 grown daughters and a son.
Grown up.
Grown up.
Before you know it, the children will be grown up and leaving home.
I've got 2 grown-up sons.
I expect more grown-up behavior of you.
If you're frightened, tell one of the grown-ups.
Growth.
Growth.
We've seen an enormous growth in the number of businesses using the web.
The rapid growth of world population. The recent growth of interest in African music.
Measures to stimulate economic growth.
A period of rapid growth in the economy.
The company is preparing for zero growth this year.
Debt collection is a huge growth industry.
Vitamins are essential for healthy growth.
A means of stimulating plant growth.
A growth hormone.
Cinemas declined with the growth of television.
A loving home is essential for a child's personal growth. The journey towards spiritual growth.
A cancerous growth.
A growth on his lung. Feed the plants to encourage new growth.
His chin bore a thick growth of stubble.
Groin.
Groin.
Grub.
Grub.
Let's get some grub.
Jake got on the floor and grubbed about under the desk.
Chickens grubbing for worms.
Farmers were encouraged to grub up hedgerows. Farmers were encouraged to grub up hedgerows. Farmers were encouraged to grub up hedgerows.
Grubby.
Grubby.
A grubby handkerchief.
A gang of grubby kids.
The grubby details of his financial dealings.
Keep your grubby paws to yourself.
I bet he can't wait to get his grubby hands on my money.
Grubstake.
Grubstake.
Grudge.
Grudge.
Is there anyone who might have had a grudge against her?
Mr. Gillis was not normally a man to bear grudges.
I'm not harbouring some secret grudge against you. It could be the work of someone with a grudge against the company.
You let nasty little personal grudges creep in.
I really grudge paying for poor service.
I don't grudge him his success.
A grudging apology.
He grudgingly admitted he'd been wrong.
Gruel.
Gruel.
Grueling.
Grueling.
The cast took a break from their grueling schedule.
A grueling journey.
Gruesome.
Gruesome.
Police described it as a particularly gruesome attack.
Spare me the gruesome details.
Gruff.
Gruff.
His manner can be rather gruff.
A gruff reply.
His voice became gruff.
Grumble.
Grumble.
Farmers are always grumbling about the weather.
A few passengers grumbled that their cabins were too small.
This is boring, Kathleen grumbled.
Thunder grumbled overhead.
How are you today? Mustn't grumble.
The usual grumbles about pay.
Grumbling. Grumbling.
Grumbling.
She paid up with some grumbling.
Soon, the grumblings turned to open discontent. The grumbling of distant thunder.
Grump. Grump. I hate Mondays. I wish you would stop being such an old grump. He was grumping about how cold the house was.
Grumpy.
Grumpy.
Mina's always a bit grumpy first thing in the morning.
Grunge.
Grunge.
Grunge rock.
What's all that grunge in the bathtub?
A pair of grungy trainers.
Grunt.
Grunt.
He just grunted and carried on reading his book.
Grunting with effort, she lifted me up.
Chris gave a grunt and went back to sleep. The grunts moved the crates.
Grunt work.
Grunt work.
These guys do the grunt work in preparing tax returns.
Griffin.
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 G-spot.
G-spot.
G-string.
G-string.
Great Britain. Great Britain.
Guacamole.
Guacamole.
Guano.
Guano.
Guarantee.
Guarantee.
I guarantee you'll love this film.
If you send the application form in straight away, I can guarantee you an interview.
I cannot guarantee to work for more than a year. The law guarantees equal rights for men and women.
All our products are fully guaranteed.
The stereo is guaranteed against failure for a year.
The bank will only lend me money if my parents guarantee the loan.
The stereo is guaranteed against failure for a year.
In movies, talent by no means guarantees success.
The built-in thermostat guarantees that the water remains at the same temperature all the time.
This latest incident is guaranteed to make the situation worse.
Even if you complete your training, you aren't guaranteed a job.
They offer a 2-year guarantee on all their electrical goods.
Our computers come with a 1-year guarantee.
Is your TV under guarantee?
A money-back guarantee.
I'm afraid there's no guarantee of success.
I cannot give a guarantee that there will be no redundancies.
The bank is holding the airline's assets as guarantees.
Guarantor.
Guarantor.
Guard.
Guard.
There were 2 security guards on duty outside the building.
We were stopped by border guards.
Armed guards were posted by the exit.
The prison guards were reasonably friendly.
Who was on guard the night the fire broke out?
Gunmen stood guard at the camp entrance.
He was taken to hospital where he is now under police guard.
The president has called in the National Guard.
A face guard.
A fire guard.
These men are dangerous, so you'll need to be on your guard.
Something in his tone put her on guard.
Senator O'Hare was caught off guard by the question. Senator O'Hare was caught off guard by the question.
Police colleagues formed a guard of honor at her funeral.
The communist old guard.
He swung at me, and I brought my guard up.
The sergeant told Swift to guard the entrance. A lioness guarding her cubs.
There is no one to guard these isolated farms against attack.
Chiefs who jealously guarded their independence. A closely guarded secret.
Exercise can guard against a number of illnesses.
Nurses should guard against becoming too attached to their patients.